Every time I post a video about serial murder, I can count on one thing. Someone in the comments is gonna say something like, what about gang members who kill multiple people? Or, hey, King Von was basically a serial killer. Or, a hitman kills dozens, so why is he not a serial killer? So today, I wanna take that comment seriously. Why are mafia hitmen, contract killers, and gang members who kill multiple people not considered serial killers? Why does criminology separate those categories? Why do the FBI and virtually every expert in homicide studies insist on keeping them distinct? And why do people in the audience, people in the comments, people even in documentaries still instinctively blend those categories together? And I want to talk about King Von too, because if I don't mention him, the comments are certainly going to do it for me anyway. Let's start where we kind of have to start. What is a serial killer? Not a movie version. I mean the actual criminological definition that researchers use when analyzing behavior across hundreds of cases. Because without that baseline, everything else falls apart. A serial killer is someone who kills multiple victims in separate events spread across time. Some places say 2 or more, others say 3 or more. There's a cooling off period between the murders. There's a return to daily life. There's a psychological component driving the murders. The motive is internal and personal. And most importantly, the murders are not committed for financial gain, not for drugs, not for gang retaliation, not for mafia business, not for territory. The murders exist because the killer wants to kill. The murder itself is the goal. It's the source of the pleasure, fantasy, and compulsion. And what do we do with someone like Jeffrey Dahmer? He's absolutely, unquestionably a serial killer, right? There's no debate there. But Dahmer himself said repeatedly that the murder was not even the part he wanted. He did not enjoy the killing. He said the goal was to keep someone with him, to possess them, to stop them from leaving. The murder was a means to an end. So now it sounds like we got a contradiction on our hands, right? Because if killing as a tool for another goal disqualifies hitmen and gang members from being serial killers, why doesn't it disqualify Dahmer? Why does he still fit squarely in the serial killer category when the murder itself was technically just instrumental for him too? Well, that's where motive becomes more nuanced than just asking whether murder was the final objective. Serial killers often pick victims who represent something to them. Sometimes the victims share an identity that the killer obsesses over. Sometimes it's symbolic. Sometimes it is fetishistic. The point is that the murder springs from within the killer, not from an outside demand or organizational structure. This is why criminologists always emphasize the cooling off period. The killer goes back to regular life for a while. They reset, they plan, then they fantasize, they rehearse, they return to everyday roles, and then they strike again. The cycle is one of the core pillars of serial murder as a classification. Without that cycle, the entire behavioral model breaks down. Okay, so now let's put that definition in your back pocket for a moment, because we need to talk about an entirely different category of killers. But real quick, before I go any further, hey, welcome to Breakfast Cereal. I'm Josh. If you're new here, welcome. This series is basically me just exploring different questions that pop into my head. Sometimes, like today, it's a question that I see in my comment section a lot. I read all those comments, and I love to make new episodes based on what's going on down there. If you end up liking this video, hit subscribe and join the other cornflakes, as I like to call them. It's quickly becoming a great community around here, and that conversation down in the comments is always interesting. Now, this category of killer is very different. These killings are not driven by an internal fantasy or compulsion. They're driven by external forces, money, orders, loyalty, territory, fear, retaliation, business disputes. They're embedded in a social system where killing is a tool used for practical purpose. It's grim, it's violent, it's traumatic, but the motive is instrumental. The killing is a means to an end, not the end itself. See, there's a study that compared hitmen to serial killers published in Psychology Today. Here. It highlighted something crucial. Professional assassins do not select their victims. Kind of obvious, right? They're given their victims. The motives belong to someone else. In serial murder, the killer selects the victim from their own psychological universe. The selection itself is a major component of the gratification. Even within organized crime, like Italian mafia murders, for example, operate on an entirely different principle. They're calculated, they're strategic, they're transactional. A mafia hit is part of a power structure, a hierarchy, a conflict within an economic or political system. These killings may be brutal, but they're not committed because the killer has an internal fantasy life that revolves around murder itself. Gangs. Now, this is where things get even more misunderstood. But again, same thing here, folks. Motive and context control the classification. The killings of specific targets, rival gang members, individuals that are already kind of, within that gang or a conflict network, or people who threaten that group. The motive is not internal fantasy. It's external survival and allegiance and social identity. And this brings us to one of the most requested examples.
Vaughn.
King Von.
What? You know I'm the realest, and you know I'm a killer. No.
Every time I mention anything vaguely related to crime, here come the comments. King Von was a serial killer. King Von had multiple bodies. King Von should be classified with Bundy and Gacy. Someone tell me how he is not a serial killer. Okay, so let's take that seriously. Let's actually examine whether King Von fits the definition of a serial killer. First, the factual background. King Von, born Devon Daquan Bennett, was affiliated with the Black Disciples in Chicago. He was charged in violent incidents, involved in alleged gang conflicts, and linked to several homicides through police reports and informants. And he had a documented history in environments where shootings and retaliation were common. He died at 26 after being shot during a confrontation in Atlanta. So now ask the question, was he killing out of personal compulsion or fantasy? Or was he participating in a gang conflict where violence is part of the structure? Everything about his documented activity points to the latter. His alleged victims were not random strangers selected to fulfill a personal psychological need. They were rival gang members or individuals tied to a network of ongoing conflict. The motive is group-based, not internal compulsion. You cannot have a serial killer classification without personal motive, without internal psychological reward, without a cooling off period that exists because the killer has temporarily satisfied a fantasy and is waiting for it to recharge. A study on intermurder intervals, that's a tongue twister, found that serial killers often wait days or months or even years between killings. I mean, in the video that I made a while back on mass shooters, I compared that serial killer compulsion to a cigarette. I talked about it in the one React video on Dahmer as well. It's like you have a cigarette and you feel good. The addiction is gone. I feel fine. Well, not really, is it? Just temporarily fulfilled. But it's got a half-life. Eventually, that craving starts to build and build again until you have to have another cigarette. But gang violence, that doesn't follow that rhythm at all. It just follows the external, the conflict cycles. Contract killing is something entirely different. A study from Australia analyzing 162 contract killings found that the killers viewed themselves as professionals. They conceptualized the act as a business transaction. That's the opposite of serial murder. Who cares? When I see someone in the comments say that gang members are serial killers, I get what they're trying to say. They're saying that violence should be taken seriously, that the death count matters, body count matters. They're saying multiple victims are still multiple tragedies. And I agree with you for sure. But classification is not about minimizing. It's about understanding why the violence happens so that we can respond to it, study it, and hopefully prevent it. When law enforcement classifies a case as serial murder, they activate entirely different investigative protocols. See, they expect the killer to return to a fantasy-driven cycle. Nobody's searching for a fantasy signature or a ritual pattern when they investigate a mob hit. And this is why the distinction matters. If you call a gang killer a serial killer, detectives will run the wrong playbook. The wrong classification can literally derail an investigation. Serial killers are predators who would kill even if society were safe and stable. Gang members exist in environments where killing is part of a larger social and economic ecosystem. One is internal and the other is external again. And if you want one final thought, here's mine. When people say King Von was a serial killer, they're not trying to make an academic claim. They're reacting to the number of deaths. They're just reacting to the violence. But classification is not emotional, it's analytical. It's based on decades of behavioral research. And that is why King Von, mafia hitmen, and gang members do not fall into the serial killer category, no matter how many boxes they seem to check at first glance. The violence is real, the tragedy is real, but the category is something else entirely.
You know I'm the realest, and you know I'm a killer. No, I think I need the best. Cause when you lie, I swear I feel it. Right in my heart, girl, you tryna kill me. Damn, don't you know I got feelings? Girl, you playing with a real. Got a couple million, I'm still in the buildings. I know I'm on the blocks, you can tell by the ceilings. No ass shots, I can tell, I can feel it. And I heard you got hurt, baby girl, I can heal it. And if you need it right now, baby girl, I sell it.